to the Brando. The Brando. No, welcome back to the. We'll try to do 3, 2, 1. Hello, and welcome back to the Brandon and Daryl experience. I'm Brandon.
And I'm Daryl.
And today, our topic is going to be cancel culture. And so, with this topic, I think me and Daryl wanted to talk about how it's been applied throughout society nowadays. Does it exist? How effective has it been? Both in the mainstream media, but also in just almost like day-to-day cases, because not just celebrities are getting canceled, but regular people are getting canceled too, to a degree. So I guess just to even just start off with, just to set a basis with what we define cancel culture to be, it's just, someone's past actions or maybe current actions have now been brought up to the surface, and people want those people to be held accountable for the things that they've done. Some famous examples being like Harvey Weinstein, R. Kelly, Bill Cosby. Those are clear-cut examples of how I would say cancel culture was, I wouldn't say originally intended for, but that's where the accountability started with. It's like, these people have done heinous things. We want them to basically atone and be reprimanded for their actions. And now I would say it's kind of evolved into space where now anyone can be canceled. And it's for things that have started out maybe even 10 years ago. People are starting digging for their past. It can happen to, we'll get into examples of like those things, but that's just a general basis of cancel culture and where we're going to be coming from and where we're seeing it as. Daryl, where do you want to start in terms of this? Do you want to start with specific cases and maybe celebrities? You want to start with the laymen, as in people like us, just your average day folk, or how do you want to start this?
Yeah, we could really start, I guess starting with celebrities would be the easiest, just to kind of get a sense of like what cancel culture generally will look like, and we can kind of get into like our different takes on the different situations as far as like what the effects of canceling have had on these people, generally speaking.
Okay.
So, I mean, who do you want to start with?
I think we can start with the more ambiguous, or not even ambiguous. It's more so like the cases that people try to get canceled, and then it's almost like an oof, like maybe we shouldn't, not we, but maybe it's usually Twitter. I feel like Twitter is usually the people that cancel, like Twitter.
Yeah, it's really just Twitter, and that kind of gets into something that I was going to bring up later, but we'll get there.
Yeah, so for example, I think some avid people I would say are James Gunn and Kevin Hart. These are the kind of people that had some, what do you say, some spicy tweets, you could say, some that didn't age too well in the modern day, but they were from like 10 years ago, or maybe they were understood or taken out of context. And so for James Gunn, there was a potential little mishap where he could have lost his director and writership with Disney in terms of Guardians of the Galaxy 3 because of a spicy tweet. We won't go into that, but basically there was a spicy tweet he made a few years ago. People were like, oh my god, Disney, look at this. Get this man off the project. And Disney was like, oh, I mean, like, I guess so. We're Disney. We have Disney money. We don't want to get our reputation tainted. And so they're like, yeah. But then I think a few celebrities such as Dave Bautista was like, I'm not working on this movie if James Gunn's not on this movie. And it's like, yeah. And then for Kevin Hart as well, same thing. He made a comment in regards to I think gay people and whether or not how he would react to if his son turned out or come out as being gay, and people were a little upset with that as well. And so with these things, it's almost like, or at least where I come from this angle is, should we be canceling people almost for things that they've said before in the past, where it's like, how much weight do we want to put to that, as opposed to people like obviously much heinous, much more higher severity, like R. Kelly, Harvey Weinstein, Bill Cosby. It's like these people have done actions, that are worth canceling and actually putting to have serious repercussions. Where I feel like canceling in general, to people like James Gunn, Kevin Hart, it's like they said some things, but you don't know, maybe they've changed, maybe their views have changed, maybe like. I think in James's case, it was even just a quote unquote joke in his perspective. And I mean, I'm of the perspective where it's like, jokes are jokes, but I know not everyone feels that way. So it's like, how do we treat people like that?
Yeah, so I think that like both cases are kind of complicated in different ways. Um, I think that in the case of James Gunn, I really don't remember what the tweets were specifically, but I do remember that they were very like in poor taste, like very much like the type of humor that you'd see in like how do I describe this? Basically, very Gen X humor, like
Hmm.
very like vulgar, in poor taste, and like that's kind of been James Gunn's brand prior to even coming on to Disney with Guardians of the Galaxy. Like if you've seen a lot of his work from the 2000s, that's always been his thing. Last episode in our good bad movies episode, which you should definitely check out if you get a chance, we mentioned like one of his previous works was he worked on Scooby Doo, and you could see a lot of like that influence in that movie as well. And so like that's always been kind of like his thing. Um, and I think that like now those jokes have really aged, and they very much don't come across as funny anymore. If anything, it comes off as damaging to a lot of people. And I think the thing about James Gunn is that like I think that was always his brand. So when it came out and Disney's immediate action was to fire him, it just came off as just not a good look for Disney, if anything, because if this was something that really, I would have expected that that'd be something that they would have looked into prior to even hiring him to make one of their films in the first place. I don't think that. I think the other thing about James Gunn though is that I think he's always been someone who's always like grown, and he is somebody who acknowledges that like the things that he said were in poor taste. Like he very much up front, I believe, if I remember correctly, I believe up front he apologized and was like, hey, like yes, these were bad, I thought it was being funny, I wasn't, sorry. And like that goes a long way for a lot of people, and I think that's kind of the thing about it is that like you look at some people who get canceled and some of them double down and they're like, oh well, I said what I said because of this and I still stand by it or whatever. And it really dismisses a lot of the criticism that some people may have about the thing. But in James Gunn's case, from what I remember, he acknowledged it and was like, I mean, I've changed. I'm not the same person I was 10 years ago. And same with Kevin Hart. I think that the Kevin Hart thing, I think the jokes, from what I remember, I feel like the jokes from Kevin Hart were worse because they weren't, I personally, I don't even think they were jokes. At least I don't think they were funny at the very least because they basically were like, so if your child came out as gay, you would abuse them. And I get that the joke is supposed to be like, you are insecure, like you have your own insecurities and you have your own viewpoint about this kid, that like you're the bad guy in that situation, but like it doesn't come off as like some sort of joke where you really need to think about it. Like it just sounds like you're abusing your children. And that's kind of the thing. And on top of that, that's an experience that a lot of gay people have had because they've had like bigoted parents, for example, and so
Hmm.
that just struck a completely different type of chord. But again, in Kevin Hart's situation, like he apologized, he took accountability, and he was like, yeah, I'm not the same person I was 10 years ago. And so I don't think that the best route to go is to just like dig up old stuff and try to use that against other people as a way to ruin their character. But there are other factors that I kind of take into account when we get into those things, and there are probably other examples that will better illustrate that. But with those two, like that's kind of how I felt about that whole situation, and I think that like, yeah, I don't know. There's the two of them are very interesting situations because, personally, I would argue that like were they canceled? Kinda not. I mean, I think that
I mean, Kevin
that
Hart lost his Oscar. Well, so
he
he
stepped down.
lost it. Well, he stepped down, but after he had the opportunity to come back, but he decided not to, which
Exactly.
because of the whole incident, which understandably so. It's almost like kind of like why would you like obviously you either stick with me or you stand like you're against me in a sense where it's like that's kind of hurtful just to be like all right you're fired from this job but now that like people have come back around now you're gonna be like all right here's your job back and it's like ooh I can't.
Well, that's what happened with James Gunn. I with Kevin Hart, I'm pretty sure he stepped down.
I
Like, that
thought
was his
his
decision.
I thought his response was because he was upset that or not
It
like
was
not like sad or he was just like almost like frustrated that like there was a decision made like on behalf of him almost without having a discussion with him.
From what I
So
remember, the Academy didn't make a decision. That's just
they did not.
the stuff came out, and then Kevin Hart addressed it and stepped down from his Oscar job. At least that's what I remember.
Okay, well maybe I'm misremembering, but
Yeah,
regardless,
but with James Gunn, that point still stands though, because he was fired, and then when everyone was like, "What?" they were like, "Oh, you want your job back? Here you go." So yeah.
I mean, Disney money do talk though, so I mean, I would take it too. I'd be like,
Oh God.
I don't think the Oscars,
Fair.
like hosting the Oscars, is a well-paid job, and if it is, you only get it once.
I think it's weird. I think that I don't really know if it pays well in comparison to like other jobs, but it's probably like a really good like thing to have on like your resume.
It's
like,
like
oh,
a
this
nice.
person like hosted the Oscars, and especially if you did well, like that would be like a really good look for your career.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
But
you go.
oh, I was just gonna say, but like when I was mentioning like examples of like of I guess other factors that kind of play a role in whether or not I think that someone like deserves to be canceled or not. I think one of the factors that I really think about is not just like what society was like at the time, but also like age. So like one, how long ago really was it, and two, how old were you when that thing happened? So like that kind of gets into a good example of that would be something that happened very recently, which is what's been going down with like the whole Joe Rogan situation.
Oh yes.
And the thing about that really throws me is that like in his case, like I don't know if I would say that he necessarily like just be like deplatformed or whatever, which is definitely something that can happen due to cancel culture. But I think that it was really very much an issue for me that like some of the things he was saying, like right now, if I'm not mistaken, he's like a 50-some-year-old man. When he said these things, even if they were 10 years ago, he was still like in his fucking 40s. Like he's a grown ass man. And so like it really strikes me as weird that he would make jokes about like comparing black people to apes and saying the N-word like 30 times and then just being like, "Oh, well, you just don't know the context." Like I don't know about that. That's a no.
It's a little that's a there has to be some pretty good context.
Yeah, exactly.
like please explain, Joe.
Yeah, exactly. And like
yeah.
Yeah, in his case that's kind of where I'm like I just because like that like there isn't even like yes there's still that area of like, oh well, will you allow them to like grow and will you allow them to learn from their actions? But the thing about it is that like at that age, like I don't really know what exactly it is that would make you think that saying those things was okay. I just don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see that perspective, and I'm probably more on the more lenient side where it's like I still think there can be room to grow. I'm not sold on the idea that once you hit a certain age you can't grow and develop. I mean, I understand it's certainly much harder and you're definitely more set in your ways, but I would hope that, especially from this incident, especially being more public and like you're in the eye of the public, that someone like Joe Rogan could hopefully obviously turn around and whatnot. Obviously what he does in his private life that we don't know about, obviously we can't change that. But because things have surfaced and we know about these things and it's clear that things have been said, you would hope that maybe you grow and you learn from these experiences and things like that can change. And obviously in the sense of Kevin Hart and James Gunn, we've seen that they've apologized and whatnot, and they said they've learned from what they said and obviously don't hold the same views as they once have.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about unless you had something else, I think you were about to say.
Oh no, yeah, no. Go ahead. I don't want to.
Oh no, because I want to go back on what you were saying about doubling down with people who double down. I know we talked about this actually the other night. I think you might know where we're going with this, but Dave Chappelle.
Oh no! Oh God, not Dave Chappelle.
We won't stay long on this topic, but as someone who's been I wouldn't say their community, but the people who aren't in their community looking into have been trying to cancel him. And I guess I want to bring it to you because I know you have strong feelings about Dave. Do you think he should be canceled for his commentary, his jokes, or whatever you want to call them? Because I know you don't necessarily find them to be jokes, but his dialogue, the way that he just talks about the trans community. Do you think that is worth canceling? Because he's doubled down, like you've said, or do you think this is something that well, like Joe Rogan, do you think it's more like he's too old, he may not change kind of thing?
Well, I think the thing about Dave Chappelle is that like, um, I don't even know where to go with it because okay, so his whole thing for me is very like it's very complicated. Like I understand that he is like this really well revered comedian. And I think that no matter what people say, ultimately he's still going to remain successful because he's been around for so long. He has so much clout. He has such a large platform that like basically at this point like he has built like an empire for himself. I would argue even bigger than Joe Rogan's, honestly, and Joe Rogan has a pretty big empire as well.
100%, I think.
Yeah.
Dave
So,
Chappelle,
and
yeah.
I think that like and I think that the thing with Jay Chappelle and those jokes is that for me, and this is something we really went into like in like very deeply, is that like the jokes that he was making to me don't come off as jokes because they seem very well just to be straight with it, they just come off as super transphobic, and this coming from someone who's a straight like cis male. Like I don't, and I think that when it comes to like people in the trans community basically coming out and saying, "Hey, this is an issue," I just think that like that him making jokes about the trans experience doesn't make sense because he is not someone who understands that experience, and so his jokes to me come off as a way to criticize and invalidate that community as opposed to just like making light of this thing that trans people go through, if that makes sense. And I get like what he's trying to get you to think about in his jokes, but I just ultimately don't really think that that's the takeaway. I think that in the end, I think you really have to jump through some hoops to really get to that takeaway in some ways. And so with him and like as far as like getting canceled, I don't think that he could ever get canceled, but I do think that like I do think the things that he said are a problem. Like I do legitimately believe that's an issue.
So, do you think? I mean, I think this is an issue with Twitter, where I think the communities there usually get really heated really quickly, and obviously this leads to cancel culture. Do you think there should be just I don't even know what to call it, but essentially almost like a reform like movement instead, where it's like we address people instead and almost have a dialogue instead of trying to outright cancel people, where it's just like, ah, fuck you, you're going down, I don't want to see you ever work again, I don't ever want to see like this and that. Like, do you think that's more destructive in that behavior than try? I mean, obviously, like, I don't think anyone would disagree that I think having an open dialogue and having conversations with people would be a lot better, but do you think it's possible even for, because I feel like with social media in this regard, it's hard to even voice the more, I would say, moderate or like neutral opinions, where it's like, okay, let's have a civil discussion.
Well, I think it's hard because when you have, and especially if you're talking about having it on like a public platform of some kind, it's really hard to really have that dialogue because I think that there is this level of so okay, so there's this fallacy that I learned about called, and I looked it up to try and figure out like what it was called. It's called a false balance, like I guess fallacy. Maybe it's not. Maybe fallacy is the wrong word to use here. But the basic idea is that essentially in an attempt to have a dialogue that is unbiased, to present information in an unbiased manner, you inadvertently create a bias by putting both things on equal footing
Mm-hmm.
when one thing doesn't have anything to make it valid, like any sort of evidence to suggest that it's valid. So it would be like, for example, if you had a dialogue between a scientist and a flat earther.
I actually was thinking the same. I was about to ask.
Yeah,
you,
so it's
okay,
like
yeah.
you place them both on equal footing, but the problem is that one thing has that evidence, the other thing does not. And so by doing that, you frame a person's opinions as being fact, and that creates an issue in that dialogue. And so if you were to have that dialogue about the trans experience with Dave Chappelle and let's say trans activists or trans people specifically, it may create a situation in which, well, Dave is sharing his opinions and then these people are sharing facts about their experience, but we're presenting it in a way where they're both correct.
I can see where that can be an issue.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna. um, minimize or anything of the trans experience. But to be fair, it's also anecdotal. So everyone's experience is different, even within the trans community. So really, it's experience versus experience. So from Dave's experience, it was with his friend Daphne, who was a trans woman. And obviously, I'm sure he's had more experiences with trans people and like had other friends and other people that he's met along the way. And so for him, he's comparing those experiences with anecdotal, actual trans people's experiences as well. So in that sense, would you say it's of equal footing in some regard? I mean, one comes from an actual trans person, the other one comes from experiences with a trans person. So yeah, I mean, I guess that's not the same. But I think my brain was just experiences equals experiences. But
yeah,
regardless.
Yeah.
I guess just to move on from the point, I think we pretty much established that like this is a more nuanced situation, and that like, for all intents and purposes, for the Dave case, it's more so something that is more productive in like a dialogue situation, and it doesn't really need to call for canceling. Not to say that I want to cancel him anyways, but I'm just saying in terms of like, for those people who wanted to cancel him, I think maybe we should look at an approach where maybe there's dialogue instead of like maybe trying to find the nuance of what he was trying to say, like what we had the other night, just like try to dig deeper into what was maybe trying to be said, and not so much running straight to the gun of Dave Chappelle hates trans people, which I genuinely don't think he does. But
well, I think it's difficult because so like I said, and I mean I've said it multiple times, so I don't really want to belabor the point, but because he has such a large platform, I don't think he would ever get canceled, like regardless of what he says. I think that in some way there will always be an audience there that is willing to kind of defend him, or say like to basically speak to basically look at what he said and try to like find ways to validate it. I think that and that's not even with this situation. Like if he said something significantly worse, because I think that what he was saying with this stuff is bad, but I do think that like it could go right off the deep end. Like it could be wildly bad. Yeah. And I think that like in the case of Chappelle, like I don't want to lose my train of thought. Having that dialogue, I think that I wish that, considering that he has such a large platform, I kind of wish that he would acknowledge it, and or even if he was just kind of like, I said what I said, then move on, create new material, find other things to talk about. But amongst like those specials, he went back and talked about it more, and then talked about it again. I think, and just kept doubling down, and just kept doing it over and over and over again. And it was like, okay. Yeah.
It's because like he's the kind of person that once he gets instigated, and it's like, because they're not dropping it, he's not going to drop it. So it's people just add fuel to the fire on both sides.
Yeah, no, for sure. And like I think that considering just how much, for lack of a better word, how much power, how much clout he has, I just kind of wish that he would just kind of find a way to move on or create new material or do whatever. Because ultimately, regardless of what anybody says, he ultimately holds the most power in this whole dynamic of like people calling him out on stuff he said, because he could literally just go like, okay, and nothing will happen to him.
Well, that brings up a good question that you keep bringing up, is like, do you think that's a bigger issue for people who don't get canceled? So who obviously should. I mean, not saying that Dave is one of them, but I'm just saying for people who are in like such high positions of power, whether that because of society or whatever, because you have all this, I guess you can say influence or whatever. Do you think that's a bigger issue? Like that the stands essentially that will like back behind anyone who's just like going after their favorite person, like this idolization of celebrities almost?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it of course depends on the person, depends on the severity of what it is that they did that led to said canceling, and that kind of gets into another question of, would it still be considered canceling if the severity of the thing goes beyond just simply like a tweet or saying something that's inappropriate. So like in the case of like, if you get into like Harvey Weinstein, like he didn't send out a tweet, he committed crimes.
Yeah.
And abused his power and used that against so many different people in Hollywood, specifically women in Hollywood. And So like him being canceled, like that's, I don't know if canceling is the right way to frame that, considering that like that what he did was super severe.
Yeah, and in that case, it's just accountability for your
exactly
crimes. Yeah.
like yeah, and I think that it just depends on like I guess there kind of has to be like a balance there where it's like, okay, did what you do, was it so severe as to you losing whatever platform you have? And I think that it also depends on what type of platform you have also. So like in the case of like if you talk about like Harvey Weinstein, he's a big Hollywood producer. So if a bunch of people basically came out and was like, oh, he like if he tweeted something and he would just sound like an asshole, or he was like Trump level asshole, then people would basically be like, oh, fuck you, but he would never really, like, nothing would ever happen. But because of what he did to so many other people, he lost that power deservedly because he committed those crimes. In a similar way as like someone on Wall Street, like, okay, cool, a bunch of people saying they're an asshole, but as soon as they commit a crime, to some degree, depending on who it is, they'll lose that power. But like when you look at like internet celebrities, for example, so like when you talk about someone like a Shane Dawson,
Yeah.
that's completely different because the audience that he has is strictly like an audience that is of our generation or younger, and his audiences are much more willing to basically just be like, this is fucked up, like, no, and then much more willing to be like, okay, we're done with you, like, we're not doing this. But at the same time, he still has a platform.
Yeah,
which is crazy to think about.
I mean,
and if you don't know who Shane Dawson is, long story short, he's an internet personality. He used to do skits, but his skits included stuff like blackface and making fun of stereotyping black women, and like doing a whole bunch of really racist and gross stuff. At one point, he got called out by the Smiths because he did something inappropriate to a poster of Willow Smith. Yeah, he's terrible, but he still has a platform, which is wild to think about.
Yeah, I think those are the more concerning cases for those that like who get like, okay. Speaking of another concerning case, Kevin Spacey.
Oh God,
How is this man just walking around, just like, he basically admitted to doing those things. He was just like, you know what, like, things happen. I was just with that boy.
Yeah.
I'm a gay man, and everyone was supposed to be like, I'm not sure why you're coming out, because you're coming out to admit that you just had sexual relations with an underage boy.
Yeah, exactly.
And no one said anything. Oh, I mean, nothing happened to him. Like he's still just there. He lost. Was it Cards? What's it called? The Netflix show.
House of Cards. So he lost House of Cards, and
he lost a movie. That
famously, yeah, All the Money in the World, which basically he was in the movie, playing Getty, Paul Getty or something like that, like the really famous billionaire or whatever. And then they edited him out and replaced him with Christopher Plummer. So, and then Christopher Plummer got an Oscar nomination. I think that's super funny. But yeah, no, Kevin Spacey is weird to me because he joins a group of Hollywood men, because he's not the only one that's in a situation like that. Because I look at like him, I look at oh shoot, I'm forgetting his name. The director.
Roman Polanski.
Well, Roman Polanski is one of them. Roman Polanski is one of them who technically should be in prison, but that's a whole can of worms. There's Roman Polanski, there's Woody Allen, and then there's
Woody Allen, yeah.
Oh, why am I forgetting his name? So, okay, the director I'm talking about, and maybe someone will, or rather, I have a computer.
Bryan Singer.
What am I doing?
Bryan Singer?
Bryan Singer, yes. There, thank you. Yes. Yeah, Bryan Singer, who literally was accused of being inappropriate with young boys for years, and still had a career. He directed a majority of Bohemian Rhapsody.
And all the X-Men movies.
And all the X-Men, well, not all of them, but
up until
five of that entire like franchise was directed by him. And so like it's interesting because these are all people who technically should be held accountable for the shit that they've done, but for whatever reason still manage to maintain. And this is why I question whether or not cancel culture is even like a thing. Well, not that it's a thing, but that it even works when it comes to celebrities, because these are people that really should not have a platform anymore. They should not be able to make movies or just have a voice at all on the level that they do, and yet they still do. And it's really sad that that's the case. So, like, I think that, like, at most it's just like, okay, so you called them out, you showed that they're terrible people, but then the question is, what now? Because ultimately, like, they shouldn't have a platform if they still do. And it's fucked up.
Yeah, I mean, even to a lesser degree, a lesser severity, Louis C.K., he's not making a huge comeback, but I know he is making a comeback.
He has a comedy special coming out somewhere.
Which is also just a very ironic pun that I just realized, and I'm very...
Oh.
More like his stomach.
Stop.
But so
I didn't think about it until literally just stop.
I'm so sorry. Not really. But with him, it's like his canceling was more just like, first of all, what the fuck are you doing? Because it's like, it's just a big question mark on whatever he did. And like, I mean, okay, we know what he did, but more so, why did you do it? And then like, but he was canceled for it. I mean, understandably so. But he's making his comeback now, and it's like, is he like? He's definitely not on the same level as like these other people that have been canceled or have been tried, like who should be canceled. But it's like, where does he fall into this category in terms of like, is it okay that he comes back into society? Not like, but you know what I mean. Like, is it okay that he comes back to have a platform, to have work, essentially, and whatnot?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I didn't mean
no. That's all I had.
Yeah, no. I personally don't think he should have a comeback. Personally, I think that because the stuff that he did was like, ew, like what the fuck would make you think that that's okay? And I guess unlike a lot of these other people we've named, he has actually come out and apologized. But at the same time, like,
how do you recover from that? Like,
yeah, exactly. Like at the same time, like,
I'm sorry that
this is not a tweet. This is not a tweet. This is a lot worse than that.
That they had to witness my actions.
Like there are actual like victims here of this harassment, if you want to call it that. Like,
it's very it's just so nebulous in terms of like how to even classify that, but to some degree it's almost like I don't know how you even I feel like him being comedian on top of it all, I feel like that's just the running joke, because it's like, imagine going up to do stand-up and then immediately everyone in that audience has to just like kind of negate that aspect, and I could never. I would just constantly be thinking, wow, this guy, like you, like, apparently everyone in that audience is paid money just, and like, it's just like, wow, how do you just like block that out of your head? Like, I would always be like, yeah, he's the guy that wanks in front of people, like.
Exactly. And like, and I get that like his comedy special that apparently is coming out, I don't know where this comedy special is gonna be, but I heard about it and I was like, huh,
probably not Netflix.
I hope not Netflix. That's kind of fucked up. Netflix.
HBO's the only other big one that I can think of that would platform.
I don't think HBO would do that.
No, I know they wouldn't. I'm just trying to think of the people that, you know, usually do comedy specials, and it's usually,
it might be, maybe it's like a self-produced thing, and it'll just be like on YouTube or something. But like,
ooh, ew. I don't know why that sounds kind of grody. Just like,
I mean, fitting. But
yeah.
but no, I think that like that he's going to be addressing that stuff, and like, though yes, he apologized, like don't, like, ew. Like, that's not, so like in his case, like, it's complicated. I like, as with all these cases, it's complicated, but and I don't think that his is as cut,
except for the three big
except
ones.
for the three, yes. I don't think his is as cut and dry as like a Harvey Weinstein, but I definitely do think that it's really, really fucking bad, and like, that's not really something that, like, I don't know if you can really come back from something like that. I don't think that's something you can just come back from and be like, hey guys, remember how I'm funny?
Well,
no.
Yeah, and it's the same with like another person that got canceled. I'm not sure how much you know about this person's like cancel progress or whatever, but like Ellen,
Yes, yeah.
I think she's one of the ones that actually got canceled, where cancel culture actually worked in a sense. I mean, I haven't followed her case since the initial stuff came out and where she actually lost her show, right? She lost her show early.
So I had heard rumors about that. I don't know if that actually even happened, to be honest, because as far as I know, I'm pretty sure Ellen is still going, unless it was just canceled.
Let me look it up.
I'm looking. I'm
Before
looking
I
at the
speak,
show now.
yeah, I'm looking it up now. Just
Um, the Ellen it ended. It ends this year, 2022.
okay, so maybe it was maybe it led to it ending sooner than maybe I don't know, but regardless, um, okay, so maybe this is an example of cancel culture not working again, where it's like people found out about it, the way she treated her workers, her staff, basically belittling them, other like just awful working conditions essentially as being like staff on her show, which just awful. I don't know why you would treat your workers poorly, especially a show like that. I'm sure it's like pretty high stress at least from like like on any aspects, but like stage and crew and stuff like that. And I guess like to go from there, it's just like how where do you think Ellen would go from here? Because I feel like she can't really work. She's in the same. I think she's in a similar Louis position where it's like this stuff has arisen. Even her own staff has come out saying like, "Yep, this is all true. I used to work there. She was awful to work with. She's not as nice as she seems."
Well, I think that basically just comes down to her being kind of a diva,
Mm-hmm.
which I mean doesn't make it okay. I think that she shouldn't be disrespecting people that she's working with, like on any level. But I don't think that she is canceled really, because I think that she still ultimately has the ability to create new opportunities. I think that like the fact that like because we're saying this and then like cut to like 3 years later, she's probably gonna be hosting the Oscars for like the 4th time.
Or she'll be in Finding Nemo 3.
Yeah, exactly. So like I think that like the thing about Ellen is that like I think yes, she had her talk show and everything. But at the same time, like I do think that even though people had heard about this stuff, I still think that there's a large number of people that still love her.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that like regardless of whether or not you think that she's like a bad person in real life, I don't really think that them being kind of a diva or kind of shitty really changes their. I don't know if I would say that necessarily changes their their ability to get work, depending on what their platform is. I think that ultimately that really just is like, I don't know. I think that I don't really know if I would necessarily that she has been impacted by the stuff that come out about her in the same way that like Louis C.K. has.
Mm-hmm.
But they're very different. I don't want to act like they're both similar. Her being a shitty person is not the same as him whipping his dick out for no reason. That's not the same thing at all. So yeah.
Yeah. I guess we can move on to because it kind of made me think of this transition. So these are examples of how cancel culture really hasn't been working per se. Because like another one I thought about that I'm just going to mention in passing is like Chris Brown, where it's like, how's this guy even still able to make music?
He should be fucking canceled.
He should be canceled.
I don't fucking know.
He it's not like he just like slapped Rihanna. He beat her up. Like I don't know how people are just okay with that.
Like she could have like died. Like he almost committed murder.
Like if you saw the pictures, awful. I'm just like, wow. And I guess props to Rihanna for either maybe she was scared to even press charges or do anything, but like props to her to just like quote unquote forgive him to some certain degree. But if I were her, I mean I would have just kept like going after him or just like kept reminding people just like, hey, you're buying music from this guy, and if you support me as an artist, I would hope you don't support him at the very minimum. I mean, obviously how she conducts her business is her business, and if she's moved on from that, good for her. I mean, she's living her best life. Honestly, she is.
Yeah.
But
see, I think the Chris Brown situation is funny because I think that the thing about it, or not funny, that's like weird funny.
Yeah.
I don't like Chris Brown. Ever since that happened, I never liked him. So like I'm not here for him at all. But the thing about Chris Brown that's weird to me is the fact that like it happened, but this is gonna sound kind of fucked up. It feels like it happened at like the perfect time for him. In the sense that like this happened before, at least correct me if I'm wrong. This happened before like Twitter, right? This happened before like social media really had its hold on pop culture in the way that it does now. And I think that there is a large number of people who at the time were kind of like, oh well, she probably deserved it, which is fucked up. It's really fucked up. But there were probably plenty of people at the time who minimized it as much as much as there were people who were like, oh, that's fucked up. No, like absolutely not. And I think that though people remember that happened, they don't feel the need to do anything about it. And especially considering that Rihanna is still super successful, still doing what she's doing. She's now a billionaire, you know? Like, I think that people look at that and just go, oh, well, you know, which is fucked up. I think that, honestly, he shouldn't have a career anymore after something like that. But I guess I'm in the minority. Because, like, even comparing him to, like, someone like Sean Penn, who low-key did the exact same thing with Madonna. Back when they were married. But that happened back in, like, the 80s. Where, for sure, a majority of people were like, oh, well, she probably deserved it.
Oh no, it's even funnier because like I had just seen this recently. I had no idea about it. Maybe you did. Maybe I'll bring it to light. But even Dr. Dre, because I saw him in the Super Bowl, and I saw in a forum where it's just saying like Dr. Dre shouldn't have been in the Super Bowl, or like they were saying like they're in disbelief how he was because he's been in similar situations where it's like apparently there was one report back in the day when he had beef with Ice Cube. And there was a reporter like doing a story on it or whatever. Maybe she was saying something in regards to like Dr. Dre. Apparently he like found her, beat her up like really badly, like awful, like and chased her down and whatnot. And like I was just like, what? And apparently that wasn't the only instance. He's had domestic violence issues with like apparently numerous other girls, even his own wife recently ex-wife, that she filed a restraining order against him too. I mean, again, this is all from what I've heard. Maybe it's not true, but again, even the fact that it's being rumored is kind of a point of contention to be concerned about. Like, we shouldn't be letting these people who are doing awful things that we don't want, like, our own people in our lives doing. Why do we let it happen to other people, kind of thing?
Well, yeah, no, it's weird to me because, like, it's like, you hear stories about certain celebrities like that are just so wild to think about. Is the fact that like some of these celebrities are literally did like the worst of the worst, but haven't been affected because I guess what they did happened a long time ago. I don't even know how to justify. Like there is no justification for it because even like
Kevin Spacey, I'm a gay man.
Yeah, that was bad. That was so. Oh my god. But even like I think of Mark Wahlberg, and generally speaking, like. There was a point where I was like, Mark Wahlberg's fine. Like, he's not really a great actor, but, like, you know. And then I found out that he, like, straight up, like,
committed
beat up
crime.
Asian people.
Yeah.
And nearly killed someone. Like, gouged their eyes out or some shit. And he has a career? The fuck?
That ain't it, Marky Mark.
And, like, I get it. Again, like, okay, people can change. But that's really strange that he nearly killed people and it was racially motivated, and he's had a career for like 30 almost 40 fucking years. That's weird.
Yeah, and then there's people in prison who have done less, and they're because then prison reform is not a thing, and we can't change people in that regard. I mean, I'm all up for like reforming if like for prisoners and whatnot, like, you know, help them not be in prison. But at the same time, it's like, so you won't grant those people the same luxuries and forgiveness as people who've actually done more heinous crimes. It's
weird because it's like Mark Wahlberg nearly killed somebody and it was racially motivated. He like nearly killed multiple people and it was racially motivated. This person over here, I was in jail for like 30 years for weed. What?
Excuse
like the
me?
fuck?
Yeah.
Excuse me? Like, I don't understand this. It doesn't make any sense to me. And like, I don't even know, like, and of course, like, there are some people who will be like, oh, so what, you want to like cancel Mark Wahlberg? And I don't think it's that simple. I think it's just, it's weird to me that like there are people who have still managed to have this success when the shit that they've done is so terrible. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that's where it's interesting with accountability too, and what we've said. Like, if it's like, again, the level of Kevin Hart, James Gunn 10 years ago, probably shouldn't dig up the past that way in tweets. Like, that's not going to really solve anything. Most people change based on their words and what they've said, and like, even if they don't mean it, I would say I wouldn't take that to heart, what they tweeted 10 years ago, compared to what someone did 10 years ago, in the sense of they beated someone senseless because they were Asian.
Yeah,
It was an Asian old man too, so it's like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was.
The I bring up the old man part because it's like, I want to bring the Asian part because it's like, not Asian age the age
Agent,
part.
like the age part
Yeah.
of it all. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But I mean,
because-
both are a factor.
Yeah,
So
no,
like,
no, of course,
yeah.
no. The fact that he, like, but more so just like, he's, for me, just like, old man, I usually correlate with probably not defenseless, but more susceptible to, not being able to defend themselves against a probably strapping 20 to 30-year-old Mark Wahlberg. Like,
yeah, exactly.
uh,
Yeah, it's just it's messy, and like I think that like the thing about cancel culture, at least the way that I kind of look at it, is that like some people would basically talk about how like, oh well, this generation is just too sensitive or whatever. I don't really look at it that way. I think that, well, it's weird because I think that the thing about it is that I look at cancel culture as being an overcorrection,
mhm.
where for years, as we said, like people have been doing terrible things to other people. People have been exploited, abused, whatever, by various systems or just various people specifically or whatever. And I kind of look at it as like the fact that, and all going back to social media, we love talking about it.
Oh yeah.
With social media, the thing about it is that like social media and also just the internet at large, because it's so easily accessible to everyone has like access to information that they didn't have access to like many years ago. At least like literally you can find anything you want to just by a quick Google search, and you can do it from anywhere you're literally I could just pull up my phone right now and Google something.
Mhm.
And so the fact that like now like younger generations are inundated with all this information about not just things that people have done that bring that cause people to like question like morally question whether or not certain things are okay to do and certain things aren't. I think that because of those things, it's like when one person brings it up, all of a sudden a bunch of other people find out about it. Like someone will shoot a tweet out. That tweet will then spread to someone. Someone else will be like, wait, what? Share that tweet. Then it will go to like millions of people will read it, and then that just sets off a storm. Yeah. And I think that ultimately, as far as it being like a sensitivity thing, I don't know if it's necessarily a sensitivity thing, because I think that people have always been sensitive about something. Like there was a time where you literally couldn't say pregnant on TV without people being up in arms. So like I think that I think it's really complicated, because I think that people are now knowing more and more things, and those things are more easily accessible to like find out. You don't need to go to a library to find these things out. You can literally do it from your bed. So
well, yeah.
I don't know.
So then that brings up into what I wanted to go to originally before I brought up Chris Brown, but we got sidetracked. But regardless, real life situations with people, and how I'm going to tie it into social media as well, where I've been seeing like not a lot of TikToks, but enough that it's like, oh, it's not concerning per se, but it's almost like, ooh, this is kind of scary. Not that it would ever concern me, but like it's almost scary to think about how easily inaccessible some people's information is, especially slightly more vulnerable generations, such as like people in their 50s and up, that maybe don't know much about internet privacy, and so they may have stuff more easily findable. So for an example, there was this guy who went into a smoothie shop, and he ordered a smoothie without peanut butter, and so baristas or whoever, the teenage girls working behind the counter, like they make him a smoothie, give it to him. I guess he leaves, comes back, and this is where the filming starts. He starts yelling and berating them because apparently his son had an allergic reaction, and his son is deathly allergic to peanuts. So we don't know as an audience how the peanuts got in there, because technically, so this is how it could have been construed. When he said no peanut butter in the smoothie, probably the girls thought, okay, no peanut butter in the smoothie. It doesn't mean don't have any, like, as opposed to my son
I
is
think it could
allergic
just easily been like
yeah,
they might have forgotten when they were making them, like,
or not even, yeah, it could have been easy. It could have been easy as like they forgot, or in my thought is that like if you don't specifically say my son's deathly allergic to well, not deathly allergic, but if, we have a peanut allergy, that's a whole like clean down process. Like you have to clean everything that came in contact with peanuts.
Yeah.
So maybe they didn't understand as in like a preference, like peanut butter. No peanut butter is a preference versus no peanuts because allergies, which is a whole thing. But regardless, it happened. A guy comes in and starts braiding them. Be like, I don't know. I said no peanut butter or no peanuts in my smoothie. And the girls are like, oh, we didn't know. We're so sorry. Blah blah blah. And then he starts basically cussing them out. Even calls one girl just like you stupid immigrant, go back to your country, kind of thing. And then he almost like he throws the smoothie even at her afterwards too.
Yep.
And then he tries to get behind the counter by going through one of the doors.
Yep.
Obviously this blows up on TikTok. People share it. People are like saying like, get this man, find out who he is, find out where he works. People do. They find out and they do like the whole like this you, and then they basically dox him essentially. They don't give out where he lives or things like that, but they basically say this is what he does. He's a financial advisor. This is how much he makes, which is like he's handling millions worth of people's assets and whatnot.
Yeah. And
he gets fired. And it's like, was it of equal was it just for him to get fired essentially? Was it just for him to face these repercussions because of the way he conducted himself and how he treated these young girls? Obviously, I think everyone would agree how he treated them was awful, and that he shouldn't have even been confrontational or even violent. And like, if anything, you could argue that he should have probably just been focusing on his son or whatever, depending how recently this was or whatnot. But no one's arguing that. It's more so, was it too far in sense of like he lost his job? Because this is the real world now. You're messing with people's livelihoods, and it's just something to quander. It's not. I'm not necessarily saying he deserved it. I'm not saying he didn't deserve it. I just want I'm just speaking out there in terms of like, was it too far? Daryl, what do you think?
So I look at that situation and I look at it in a similar light as like the Amy Cooper was her name situation.
I think she was Cooper.
Yeah, where it was a woman who was talking about being harassed by this guy, and he was recording it the whole time. And then she said that she was going to call the police and tell them that a black man was attacking her, and lied and said that she was being attacked by him all while he was recording. She did lose her job. She also lost her dog as well because people looked at it as like she was like abusing her dog in the video. So my thing is that there's nothing really that could defend that kind of behavior. I think that yes, it is a very stressful situation. I hope his son's okay. I hope that his son is fine. Yeah. But at the same time, to take it out on the workers to the point in which you are like basically harassing and abusing them to the point in which you're basically saying like, oh, I'm about to get behind that counter and beat your ass or whatever. I don't think he said that specifically, but he was basically alluding to beating them up or doing something to them.
Push the door into.
He tried to get behind the counter through the door. He threw shit at them. Like the fact that he was just acting out on this level, I think says a lot about his character. Mm-hmm. And to me, like, I personally think that like, ultimately, if you look at like the company, like the people basically going to the company and saying, hey, like this is what your employee did, blah blah, or like people basically being like, oh, because of this, I don't want to use your company as a resource. I don't want to work with your company or whatever anymore. I think that ultimately that is up to the discretion of the company to be like, hey, like what the fuck.
Yeah, no,
And I think that, like, ultimately, like, as much as we say that, like, oh, these people are trying to, like, get this guy to lose his job, like, I think that people have always been that way. Not that necessarily makes it, like, okay, because I think that there are some times where it's, like, okay, but then there are other times where it's, like, what? But at the same time, like, I think that if you're going to act like that, if you're going to be so, well, one, blatantly racist, but two, so, like, just so awful to other people like that, and you get caught on camera and that stuff gets to your job, I think that is on you ultimately, because like all people did was just shared a video, and your job saw it, whether or not it was sent to them directly or they just saw it. Like, yeah. Okay, so yeah, we had a quick technical issue, but we're back. So basically, I was just saying the exact same thing I was saying like a little bit before we had that issue, where like ultimately people just shared the video and it got to the job, and the people at the job just decided like, we don't want you representing our company, like someone to act like that, like that's not the character that we want to have working with our clients. And I think that they have the right to do that. I mean, I think that ultimately, like when we look at like the real world repercussions of people's actions, I think it's tough. I think it sucks that these people could be held accountable in that way. But at the same time, it's like I personally would feel weird if this guy was still basically at the level he's at, and he act like this to other people.
Yeah, no, and I completely agree. I think maybe it's my sympathetic side, but I think about the future though too, where it's like this lives on the internet permanently. Like there's not going to be like another company that's not going to see that video or not know who that person is. Like in the Amy Cooper situation, where it's like, oh, you're the lady that like basically faked a police. Well, she actually did call the police, but basically faked saying that a black man was attacking her, just because whatever reasons, X, Y, or Z reasons it was. Like I think about it in the future. It's like, oh wow, like they're probably never going to find a job again, or like if she's trying to adopt a kid or adopt a dog, it's like these people are probably going to be more lenient, not lenient, more towards the side of the other person. And it's like, oh, I see what kind of person you are. I don't want to hire you. I don't want to let you adopt this kid. I'm not going to let you adopt this dog. It's like,
yeah,
a part of me feels bad, but at the same time, I understand why it happens and why it not. I don't want to say it's a necessity, because it's definitely not, because maybe it's because I'm overthinking, over sympathizing, but I'm just like, I can only imagine being in that situation where it's like you can't do anything essentially, or at least not for a while without it, like, or something coming up like that just seems so like such a crucial loss in your life, not like able to find a job. Like, my God, like that's awful.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel that. And like I said, it does suck that that's ultimately something that they're going to have to carry with them. But I mean, at the end of the day, like, it is about accountability. Like, as much as like as severe as that accountability may be, like that's you in that moment. I mean, I don't know how exactly, like, I don't think that choose is the right word to use, but like you decided to act the way you did.
Yeah.
And so like, I don't know. Now, I mean, I think that sooner or later, at some point, people will forget about it. They'll somehow move on some level. But I mean, I don't know if they'll ever have the same reputation they had prior to the things that are being held against them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think that like ultimately cancel culture is it's a very big can of worms. It's very complicated, but I think that it's really interesting to kind of try and delve into like what is justified in cancel culture and what is not. You know what I mean? And like try to figure out like, well, where is the line? But I think it's just it's tough, you know.
Yeah, we went over our clear cut cases, our not so justified cases, and our extreme cases, I would say, where it's like they got canceled to the utmost extreme. And I guess just to leave it off, I guess I'll ask you the question of just like, where should we be going with cancel culture? Should we continue with it? Should we somehow evolve it to be more so this learning lesson? Or like, since it is such a big presence on social media, how do we get it to be more constructive than this almost destructive process?
Well, I think that I don't know if I'd necessarily say that cancel culture should go away per se, but I do think that there should definitely be more of an emphasis on wanting to educate people on why their actions were wrong or why what they said was wrong or whatever. I think that as a society we are very reactive, and I think that that we should take into account what is it that was done, what is the impact, who did it, right? So I brought up age and things like that. If it's a 16-year-old saying some stupid bullshit, then I don't know if we should attack them. I think that ultimately educating them would be the better route, you know what I mean? And so I think that keeping those factors in mind, I think that it can become something that is more constructive for society as a whole. But I think that now there are some people who kind of, I don't want to say people who want it to be destructive, but I do think that there are people out there who kind of look at it as a way to diminish some of the things that are being called out. Does that make sense? So I hate to say Fox News, but loves talking about cancel culture. They love it. They eat that shit up. And I think that there are some valid criticisms to cancel culture, but at the same time I think that the way that they talk about it, they really do diminish okay, well, why is it that people are upset about things that have been said or things that people have done? They don't really like to talk about that. They just like to talk about the idea of, oh, well, because you said this thing, your entire livelihood is gone. And I think that ultimately, if we do try to focus more on the education part of it as opposed to the ostracization of it all, then I think that there could ultimately be more of a net benefit with it. But ultimately, it all depends on not just a group of people, but the individuals and how certain people react to things. So I don't know. Yeah, it's tough.
It do be that way.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, to end it off, do you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, just, I think I pretty much agree with everything that you've said in terms of it needing to be a more constructive learning-based process, but obviously hard to kind of do with social media being such a reactive platform where it's react first, ask questions later kind of scenarios. And I think, yeah, cancel culture can be effective when it comes to clear-cut cases, but when it comes to more nuanced things, this is where it gets a little confusing. And even with the more clear-cut cases, like in real life with that guy at the smoothie shop or Amy Cooper, it can be a bit much, to say the least, to think to which extent that their repercussions follow them and how they'll follow them throughout life.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's pretty much all my thoughts. Very serious episode.
Yep.
As I realized as we were having, I was thinking we'd have some quips and whatnot, but nope. It's like, it's a little either these people all suck, or there's a few people that were like, they're on the they're teetering on the line of okay and not okay.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of a way to lighten it up, and I'm this just needed to be that, but it's
yeah, it's fine. We don't always need to have a serious or not a lighthearted
a jokey, lighthearted nature.
Sometimes Chris Brown just hits Rihanna, and we have to just take that as is, and just be like, we have to have a conversation about them. Be like, that's not okay.
Exactly. So yeah. So moral of the story: don't hit Rihanna.
Don't hit Rihanna.
That's the ultimate takeaway here. But
don't hit on Rihanna either, because A$AP Rocky would not appreciate that.
Yes, that is true. That is very true. They are very much together. Yeah. So, yeah. But with that, thank you for listening to, as we put it, our very serious episode of the BDE podcast. Yeah. So thank you for listening, and we'll put a question down into the Spotify, but I guess the base question is, what are your thoughts on cancel culture? Do you think it's good, bad, net negative, net positive? Do you think there's any ways of changing it, making it more constructive? Let us know. Are there any cases that you think are super interesting? Definitely let us know in the comments. You can also find us on So Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music, and almost everywhere you can get podcasts. You can also find us on YouTube as well. If you want to follow us on Twitter, you can find us on Twitter. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, pretty much all social medias at the BDE Pod. And yeah, with that, I'm Daryl.
I'm Brandon.
And we will talk to you guys next time.
Bye-bye.